I work collaboratively with the provost on papers where we look at how computer information systems and business administration work together. But I think my favorite one that we did was on talking about organizational behavior, which is one of my favorite classes to teach, and how that should be a requirement for CIS majors.
Though I teach here at the university, and most of my writing tends to be grant writing and report writing and things along that line, my most favorite paper to write was a Who Am I paper, and to reflect back, do that reflective learning on how it was that I came to be who I am today.
I do enjoy writing labs for students to do. So you can get a little creative and throw some interesting things in there with different images and just different activities. So I like doing that because it's a little more interactive.
The last one that I published, which was on Anne Roiphe's 70 or 71 novel, Up the Sandbox. And the reason why I found it really fun to write was because I was using some disability studies theory, which I had never used before.
I think the reason it was my favorite was I just loved the argument. I really found that that it passed what I call the so what test. Like I had something important and interesting to say, and so the whole thing, writing about Cummings, writing about the sonnet, getting into really nitpicky arguments about movement of rhymes and Petrarchan versus Shakespeare. I love the whole process, and I was very proud. I'm still very proud to see that one.
All-time favorite paper, I really have two of them. One was a poem that I wrote for a creative writing class last summer. And my other favorite paper was a report that I did for Costa Rica. I went to Bio 277 out of Farmington to Costa Rica, and I chose to do my term paper on the effects of geothermal electricity creation and how they correlate to the infrastructure and economy and what it takes to set up such a system.
An honors H add-on paper that I did critiquing the syllabi from past professors. And I think what I enjoyed most about that was just really looking at other people's work and getting both the positive and negative aspects of it, so understanding how my writing style is and descriptions and expectations, and then also gaining what others view as important.
Well, I wear a lot of hats, and so, but as the program director at the Holocaust and Human Rights Center, I write a lot of press releases, and I write a lot of business letters, and I also then write a fair amount of sort of narrative pieces that tell the story of something, especially for exhibits.
I want that raw feeling. I want that self-awareness in writing. So I rely on other resources. I set up the grading criteria. I do find different types of writing in all my classes, whether it's a technical writing and I make them write a letter to their legislators, or it's an ISP and I'm making them develop a problem assessment that's very narrative and descriptive.
So for my writing, I use literary criticism. That's the kind of the lion's share of the writing that I do is literary criticism or some kind of textual criticism. So I do also write criticism on film and things like that, other texts.
I do a variety of lab reports, which is expected because we're doing experiments, so it's expected that you could write a report and explain what you did in your experiment. Then I also do a variety of research papers where you would do a literature review going through what's known about a certain subject, and compile a whole bunch of primary research articles, read through them, understand what experiments were done, and put together a paper based off of your reading.
Student government president, I do a lot of professional writing, memos, emails.
In business courses that I teach, I'm wanting students to get to the point. This is not flowing literature that we're writing, and have found that you know, for an executive who's very busy and gets 14 reports in a day, they're going to read an executive summary. And in that first paragraph of that first page, if it doesn't catch the executive's interest, it goes into the circular file, which means the trash can.
We've done, throughout all of my classes, a lot of journaling on just processing the work itself, what we're reading, the different stories.
I think that journaling, even from a faculty standpoint, is perspective. Number one, documentation is key in our work and human services. We're dealing with human life here, so every piece of information, even if you don't think it's important to somebody else.
That's what I'm interested in. I'm really interested in the intersection between literature and its time in which it's written. And I find myself writing a lot about that.
I think I mostly write for others, which not everybody does. And I think I mostly write around projects with regard to deadline. Another thing I write a lot is grants and grant narratives. And that's a very different kind of writing.
And I can remember when I went to grad school and I wrote my first, I wrote down my experiments and I wrote a paper about all my results, and I gave it to my mentor because we were going to try to submit the manuscript to a journal. And he looked at it and he sent it back to me. He's like, I can't believe that you made it through college writing like this. And it's not that my writing was bad, it was too sensationalized, and you can't have that with biology. So you have to take all that creativity out. And so it was almost a different mindset of, oh, well, I can't say that, oh, this was the greatest experiment ever, and instead just write about the facts.
The argument that I've seen from kind of the pushback against learning styles is that each discipline itself involves a type of learning style. So English is going to involve certain kinds of skills, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of engaging with text that science will not.
It's not as though, you know, the disciplines are so boxed in that there's no use, you know, for one for another. I think we're all very interconnected.
It's not just about English 101 or English 317. It's about every other course you're going to take, whether it's in mental health or it's justice studies or business. You are going to be writing. You need to master that skill regardless of your discipline.
If you can't, as a business major or as a business person, communicate coherently what you're trying to say, the message gets totally lost.
So I see writing as the central thing I do in all my English classes. I think about writing as being the primary way that students engage with text and with the ideas in class.
Unlike for other disciplines, I think where writing is not as intrinsically connected to the discipline, English, I think, because it's so intrinsically connected, we're working on those building blocks in every class.
As far as context goes, when I'm writing for like a professor, or like right now for my internship, I feel like I almost take on a much more professional persona, and I'm very careful about how I word things and how I sound. I don't want it to be casual and laid back. I want it to be very, you know, strict and to the point.
One of the fun things about grant writing to me is that process makes you get your ideas together and clear.
It's very helpful for exercising skills in critical thinking, organizing logical arguments, presenting ideas in a clear, lucid fashion. All of those are at least good exercises, if not directly applicable to another field.
I think that the press release, especially, you know, I very much put myself in the mindset of the reader.
You're actually writing to your audience all the time. If your audience is a business professional, you wouldn't word certain things the way you would to the public on a forum.
Audience is hugely important.
I mean, I've taken grant applications to strangers and said, read this and tell me if you understand what this organization is trying to accomplish here. Because you have to assume that the people who are reading it don't know all about your organization.
Approaching different audiences requires maybe a different set of vocabulary words, a different lexicon, different kinds of organizational tools that you use. And then for the newspaper, I'm looking at a much kind of broader audience, and so I want to use very accessible language, make my arguments very clear and lucid, and so, kind of readable to a very large audience.
I've noticed that when I'm writing something for student government, my style of writing is a lot different than when I'm writing for helpforothers.org. And it's way different if I'm writing an APA term paper for computer science.
Keeping the audience in mind is really kind of key to writing for different audiences.
In your own journal, your own diary, you should write what you like. But the rest of it, once you write it and you put it out there, let it go and let whatever happens to it. It's not your baby anymore, because as soon as another person reads it, it becomes theirs.
I guess I'm flipping the question, because when I'm writing a paper, for me, the thing I want to say, like the so what is the most important thing. I want to say something that's worthwhile, that when it's published, I'm giving people important knowledge. That's the most important thing. And then the question is, who should have that knowledge?
The first thing I ever do is think about the audience and who's going to be reading it. And then my second thought is, what is it I'm trying to get across, and what's going to be the best way for that audience?
In Drama 101, which is what I teach mostly, is I teach theater history through scripts. And we read parts of scripts, we see parts of films, and then we talk about how does that come to an audience? How does an audience feel after hearing that or seeing that scene or whatever? And what did the playwright know, and what does the audience know, and how does that make the experience a whole thing?
As many of our business students are returning to school after a while, and they bring just a wealth of knowledge. So as far as trying to recontextualize, I say, you've got all that practical information, it's fabulous, but what's the theory that underpins it?
Our writing lab is available right here on campus. It's peer-to-peer work.
Writing is a social process. Writing is a social invention. Writing itself is based on, the writing that you do, the writing that I do, the writing that students do is entirely based on all the writing that everybody else does.